Welcome, my dear students. In the last lecture, we were talking about the battery ratings. And in the battery ratings, we have determined with the help of an example how do we calculate the reserve capacity rating. And by the help of an example, we have ascertained the reserve capacity rating of a battery. Now, in this lecture, first we will start with how to determine the cold crank rating. So, another way of rating a battery is to determine its ability to operate the starter motor under extremely cold conditions. So, remember the weather condition has to be cold, and if the weather condition is cold, then only the cold crank rating is applicable. So, this is called cold crank rating. So, better I will just zoom it a bit. I think this will be fine. So, when the temperature drops, what happens? The chemical reaction that takes place inside the battery slows down. Obviously, lower the temperature, the rate of reaction will increase. Higher the temperature, the rate of chemical reaction that will increase. That we have studied in chemistry. So, when a temperature drops, chemical reaction taking place inside the battery slows down. Using the SAE standard temperature of 80 Fahrenheit, a battery will put out 100% of its rated power. At 32 Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, the available power drops to about 65%. At 0 Fahrenheit, that means at minus 18, it slows down only to 40%. So you see, as the temperature cools, the power level of the battery that reduces. So a battery's cold crank rating specifies the minimum amperes. It specifies the minimum amperes a fully charged 12 volt battery can deliver for 30 seconds at 0 Fahrenheit without falling below 7.2 battery volts. So the typical cold crank ratings are 305 ampere, 385 ampere and 410 ampere. It's not uncommon for a starter motor, depending upon the engine size, to draw at least 300 amp during the cold weather. So you can see how important cold crank ratings can be, particularly in northern climates. So this is all about the cold crank rating. So another important parameter is the specific gravity. So another battery characteristics related to temperature is the specific gravity of an electrolyte. So it is made up of water and sulfuric acid. So as the battery discharges, the electrolyte solution contains less acid and more water. Thus its specific gravity, that is weight, changes. Because acid is heavier than water, you can determine the approximate state of the battery's charge by comparing the weight of its electrolyte to the weight of pure water or its specific gravity. So a battery uses hydrometer to make its comparison. So draw a electrolyte sample into the hydrometer and read its specific gravity on the floating scale. So most hydrometers are calibrated for the standard temperature of 80 Fahrenheit. Remember this. So add 0.004 to the hydrometer reading for every 10 degrees above 80 Fahrenheit. Subtract 0.04 for each 10 degrees below 80 Fahrenheit. So this is the thumb rule. So plus 0.004 per 10 degree and minus 0.004 for minus 10 degree. So this is the thumb rule. So cranking capacity is the single most important factor. The rule of thumb is to buy a battery with at least 1 ampere of cold crank rating of the each cell inch of the engine displacement. So there is also a thumb rule for determining the reserve capacity. Until and unless you travel in the remote areas, choose a battery whose reserve capacity permits you to drive a car with a failed generator for at least 1 hour. So that situation you have to simulate. Only then you will be able to determine the reserve capacity. So the following problems can be addressed, and you can contribute to the battery's long successful life by watching out these problems. That is, defects in the generating system, overloads using a too small battery, dirt and corrosion on the battery that can be checked, then damage to the lead plates from operating in a constantly undercharged condition, physical damage to the case, under hood heat, so placement near the exhaust system. So battery selection. Selecting a suitable battery for your project car is much more than just getting the right price. So once you understand the theory behind the battery ratings, you need to know how to translate that theory into a buying decision. So the following guidelines will help you. So these are the cranking capacity. So next comes the generator. So if a battery is the heart of your car or the electrical system, the generator is the second in importance. Actually, both interact so closely that it is almost impossible to separate their functions entirely. So this section will describe the basics of a generator. So you see, the basic principle is illustrated over here. So two magnets, one with south polarity and other is north polarity, they are separated, and you move a conductor to and fro in the given direction. So in this case it will be downwards, in this case it will be upwards. So moving a wire through a magnetic field induces a voltage into the wire. That is the basic principle. So if a wire is moved in one way, then the alternating current flows in the wire. So this is the basic principle. So it explains how the generator provides current for the car's electrical system and how it acts to recharge the battery. So as mentioned in the battery section, all the electrical needs are usually supplied by the generator while the engine is running. An exception would be when the current demand of the car's electrical system exceeds the generator output. So when this happens, the battery supplements the generator output. So also the battery provides all the current needed to start the car. So that is the cranking the engine and the supplying power to the ignition system. So to understand the current generation, you need to know about the electrical phenomenon briefly discussed in the section magnetism. So better we will take a separate chapter for discussing the generator system. So a magnet has a north pole and a south pole. So it has a north pole and a south pole. So these create an invisible magnetic field around the magnet. So if you place a north pole in one magnet near the south pole of the another, magnetic field extends from one magnet into the other magnet through intervening space or the air gap. So if you hold a piece of wire between the two poles at the right angle to the magnetic field, move the wire up and down, and the voltage will be induced in the wire. This phenomenon is called magnetic induction. So I will repeat this again. If you hold a piece of wire between the two poles, suppose you have two poles and they are right angle to the magnetic field. So if you move the wire up and down, so the field and the movement, they will be perpendicular to each other. So there will be a voltage induced in the wire, and this phenomenon is called magnetic induction. And the direction of the current flows depends on the direction of the magnetic field, and the direction of the wire is moving. So the current flows one way when you move the wire up and the other way when you move the wire down. Incidentally, you could hold the wire still to move it to and fro. So next comes a DC generator. So you see in the image what has been provided is a cross section of a typical DC generator. So you see what is visible, that is, the most important thing is the rotating part, that is the armature, and the other thing is the field coil and the insulation, because if insulation is not there, so what will happen, the adjacent conductors, they will be short circuited with respect to each other. So the field coil is stationary and the armature is rotating. So you remember this thing, that field coil, if I denote this by Fc, it is stationary, and armature coil, that is rotating or moving. So armature is the rotating part. Then actually inside a DC generator, if you study proper physics, you will see that inside the generator AC is produced, but with the help of brushes and commutator segments, you can just get a rectified DC. So that is the principle. So you see the commutator segments are over in this particular section, and the brush holders are there and the brush arms are there, which is collecting the current in a unidirectional manner. So the commutators are the points from which the output is collected. So the diagram of a simple armature is demonstrated over here. So you see, this is the armature. Actually, two conductors are forming one loop. It becomes an armature. So simple armature consists of a wire loop rotated through the magnetic field to induce direct current into the wire. So the armature of the DC generator has large number of loops wrapped around the iron core. So now you see, to make an useful generator, induced voltage must be harnessed. So induced voltage must be stored. That is, mechanical energy in the moving wire must be converted into electrical energy. So it is a mechanical to electrical energy conversion. So in the moving wire example, repeatedly a wire is moving up and down in the magnetic field, which is causing current to flow in one way when the other. Because the current directions alternate, this is known as alternating current AC. So how does an AC look like? This is how an AC looks like. So you see, for the first half cycle it is positive, and for the second half cycle it is negative. So in the y-axis we represent the voltage, which is given by V, and in the x-axis we represent it by t, which is the time. So in this moving wire example, repeatedly moving the wire up and down in the magnetic field causes a current to flow one way then the other. Because the directions alternate, this is known as alternating current, that is known as AC. In a car, the current always flow in one direction, from the battery to the load. This is known as direct current or DC. But depending on the year of manufacture, your car will have either a DC generator or an AC generator, which is an alternator. So in the next two sections we will describe this in detail. So let us study the DC generator first. So you should know at the outset that a DC generator is not used in modern cars. Although it is less complex than an AC generator, its output is inadequate for high current demands for most modern electrical systems, particularly in a low engine speeds. However, DC generator was used in all the cars and until Chrysler introduced the AC generator in 1960. So if you are restoring an older car, you must deal with a DC generator. So above or prior to 1960 you will be using DC generator. So will kit car builders using a VW older than 1973. So in a automobile generator it would be not practical to rely on permanent magnets providing necessary magnetic fields. So they aren't very strong enough and they tend to weaken with age. So permanent magnets is not recommended. So the DC generator has electromagnets called field coils. So it's like this. They have field coils. So a north pole to south pole, say. And you see the coils are wound like this. So what happens when current flows, polarity will be induced in this direction. That is from north pole, this is the north pole, and opposite polarity over here, this is the south pole. So polarity will be developed, and here you place the rotating part, that is the armature. So in the armature you will have armature conductors placed like this. So what happens? This mechanical force is being exerted into the conductors. So it needs a prime mover, a generator needs a prime mover, so it will rotate. So the torque direction will be in this particular direction. So you are getting the torque and you get the field. So what will be your output? Electrical energy will be induced in the conductors. That is the principle of generator. So it is known as also Fleming right hand rule. It is known as Fleming right hand rule. So these consist of numerous wire windings on the iron pole shoes. So energized by the car's electrical system. So the battery provides initial current to energize the field. So as I was talking about, this is provided by the battery. So this is connected like this. So when it is connected, current will flow. So the battery provides initial current to energize the field. Then the generator over and feeds itself with the operating speed that is high enough. So in the moving wire example, a single wire was moved through the magnetic field to produce current, but in a generator a single wire wouldn't generate enough current to be useful. So a generator has a large number of individual wire loops wrapped around a laminated core called the armature, which is turned by a belt driven by the engine. So two ends of each wire loops are attached to copper commutator bars, as I was talking about. So these are the commutator segments. So the bars are arranged in a circular fashion at one end of the armature shaft, such that the bars for each loop are positioned exactly opposite to each other or 180-degree apart. The commutator bars are insulated from each other, so they are not short circuited, and they are made up of mica. So next, two carbon brushes mounted 180-degree apart in the generator frame. So they rub against the commutator bars. This is very important. So this configuration allows a pair of brushes to contact the commutator bars for one wire or one loop at a time. And because the armature is turning rapidly, the brushes contact successively commutator pairs rapidly. So each wire loop passes its small voltage into the brush. Because there are so many loops, the voltage flows from the generator in a practically constant stream. So generator output is directly routed into the car's electrical system. So it's there a heavy load at the moment, the current flows through the load. If the load is light, the current flows into the battery from the positive terminal through the plates, recharging the battery. That's why if there is a low load, the battery is fully charged. What happens to all the current in the generator that is produced? So these are some questions and better we will study the DC generator and its basics in a separate module or a separate chapter. So we will stop over here today. See you in the next lecture. Thank you.